Hey, welcome back everybody. Thank you for joining me on my channel. This is Trap. Tonight I'm going to go over some blazingly fast capabilities that you get with Neovim and the package manager Lazy. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to hop right into Neovim and see what I've got. So we go right into Neovim. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at the packages that I have loaded. So you can see that I've got 29 packages loaded right now. And it took a total of 27.46 milliseconds to get those packages loaded. Not bad. So let's go back to the package manager itself and go over a couple things. Lazy is telling you which packages you can actually remove from your system. So Alpha and Which-key I'm currently not using, so Lazy knows that I can get rid of them. So I can simply clean them. Those packages are now gone. The next time I enable that package, Lazy will automatically reinstall it. If we go down the list a little bit, you're going to see that I've got several packages that are not loaded, and what you're seeing is the name of the package and the event that fires that causes the package to get loaded. So at this particular point, if we go in and we look for anything wiki, we're going to find that there's a lot of things in the not installed packages associated with a wiki that are currently not loaded. So let's go ahead and get out of Neovim. We're going to take a quick look at the startup time, and then we're going to go into the wiki, and then we're going to see what the startup time looks like. The number of packages that get loaded once we start the wiki. Okay, so we're going to get out of Neovim. Nothing fancy here, and we're just going to go right back in. And package settings. Package is 20.98 milliseconds. Really good startup time. So we're going to see plus or minus 2% sometime, depending on what else we're doing on our computer at that particular time. That's not bad, actually. So we go into the wiki index. It's just a simple wiki. It's got one page. We're going to kind of go over this stuff right here. But what happened is we loaded more packages. So if we look at the packages that are loaded right now, we're up to 44 packages just because we went into a wiki. And that was an event was fired because of the file type that I have set up to enable wiki, which in my case is an extension .md or an extension .waki are the different extensions that I use. So in this particular package, one of the things I can do is I'm using a plugin manager, not a plugin manager, but I'm using a wiki that allows me to do some pretty sophisticated things. But let's say I don't remember what the name of that wiki was. I know it's on my package manager. I want to get to the web page pretty quickly. Unfortunately, Lazy doesn't provide me that information directly, but I have a solution for that. I can go in and I can find wiki. I can find the URL that I'm interested in, and I happen to be interested in wiki.vim. And I happen to know that this is the URL that I'm looking for. So if I simply copy that URL, let me do that again, so I actually copy it. Wiki, there it is right there. So I got to go back to that URL right there on that line. I don't have line numbers turned on, but you can see I yanked it. So now we're going to get out of this and we'll just paste it. So there's the URL right there. Now, wiki.vim, and that's the file type manager, so we just want the wiki, so we're just going to get rid of the file type, grab the one anyway. So we're just going to go to this particular URL. Wiki.vim is smart enough to use your XD open. So it's just launched my web browser that was associated with that URL. It'd be nice if Lazy did that, but this is my quick way to get to the same thing using my wiki manager. So as I'm taking notes and things like that I do quite a bit, if I need a URL, I know I can copy that URL from a document for a web page, or like you saw from Neovim itself, and I put it back into my wiki. I can click on it and I know I've got a valid URL at that point. So it launched what I expected it to launch, which I thought was pretty cool. We don't need the browser right now, so let's just get out of that. Let's take a quick look again at what packages. We've got 59 packages loaded at this point. So it's pretty cool. If we take a look for something called PlantUML, we're going to notice that PlantUML is loaded. So that particular package is in the loaded section. So I'm going to show you taking my wiki site, I'm going to go into a LaTeX document and I'm going to generate a diagram using GraphWiz and Java on the back end, things like that. I'm going to render that in real time as best I can. So if I just simply go to the state machine, it's a contrived state machine, there's nothing fancy about this state machine, but I simply compile it. So you're going to see that I just compiled a document, and you see over here it's got these words blah 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 in it. I'm going to get rid of blah 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 because it's not necessary for this particular purpose, for demonstration purposes. So we're just going to delete it and save it. Now we're going to notice that that page just refreshed. I'm using a browser, a file browser called Ocular. So not a file browser, but a PDF viewer called Ocular. The reason I use Ocular is because it does just what you saw. It allowed me to change the underlying file without having to click on anything. I didn't have to bring up a web browser or anything like that. I was able to configure this document, this tool, and I can use it to look at JPEGs and GIFs and PDFs and other things. And so what's also nice about it is it does tabs. So I've set up this particular environment to allow me to bring up documents. So my document, my window doesn't change on me. So once it comes up, it sticks exactly where it is. Now I am using a tiling window manager. I am using PlantUML. So the window's automatically tiling. So it's doing a Fibonacci sequence. So you get the full screen and then you get a split. The next document I bring up is going to go right in this tab, and we're going to actually look at the state machine code right now that actually does that drawing. But to do that, we're going to go back a page, and we're going to actually look at the UML diagram itself. So this is PlantUML syntax that we're looking at. I have a PlantUML syntax highlighter in here. It helps out a little bit. I like it. It's kind of fun to play with. But I'm going to zoom in on the state machine really quick. So I'm going to zoom in just so you can see what I've got in here. So we've got a state number 3 that says after gym work, more liquid, basically hydrate, right? So let's assume that we want to change hydrate to something else. So we're going to change that to I'm going to say not hydrate, but let's just call that drink Red Bull for lack of it. So we're going to call that drink INK Red Bull. Shout out to the Red Bull guys. Okay, so making that little change and saving the file, you notice that the state machine changed. It now says drink Red Bull. All I did was edit the file and save the file, and it caused the GraphWiz to regenerate the document. But just as importantly is the PDF itself was updated. So here you have an example of we're using VimTech to generate LaTeX documents. And the only thing that VimTech knows about in this particular context is grab the drawing. And so it's got a continuous compiler going in the background. And so the compiler recognizes the graph. So it's got an abstract syntax tree. And it sees that one of the files that it was dependent upon changed, it re-renders itself. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so I'm able to work this way, and when I need to, I can focus on the PDF document. When I need to, I can switch over and I can focus on the drawing itself. So I can focus on what I need to focus on. So if I had to, I might do something like split the screen, and then in one context, I'm looking at the PDF, and in the other context, I'm looking at the UML. And so I'm able to move context-wise back and forth. And as I do this kind of work, I don't have to think about how do I generate things, what tool do I need to load. I've got it all loaded into my IDE, into my, as TJ would say, my personal development environment. I've got this all set up where I can be extremely productive. So let's take a look at my packages and how I go about loading them and how I go about disabling packages. I'll give you a quick overview of that. So if we go into, I'm using tmux. So I've got another session already set up for us. It's just where all my tmux code, all my Neovim code is set up. So I'm going to close the browser because we don't need it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch another instance of Neovim, and I'm going to go in. This time what I'm going to look for is something called custom. So I'm going to look at my customized file. So you notice I'm using Telescope to find things. I've got the browser set up where it does a preview of the files and things like that. So right now, as an example, I'm not using Lualine, I am using Lualine. Let's say I don't want to use Lualine for whatever reason. I just simply go in here and tell it false. Save it. Now you're going to notice when we come in, the line at the bottom of my screen, the Lualine, all the information is gone. And if I go in and look at the packages and we look for Lualine, we're going to find that Lualine can be cleaned. It can be cleaned because it wasn't loaded, and as far as lazy is concerned, it doesn't need it. So if I go ahead and clean it and get rid of it, now I decide, oops, I really want it back. I go back into customize, and I'm going to turn two of them on this time. I'm going to turn Which-key on, and I'm going to turn Lualine back on. So I'm going to change this one to true, and we'll go down to Which-key, and we're going to make this one true as well. So I've got to spell it right. Now this time, what we're going to notice is when we launch Neovim, Lazy's smart enough to go, hey, I need these packages, and it just automatically downloaded them, and bada boom, bada bang, I'm ready to go. Now, if we look at it this time, the startup time, 158.38 milliseconds, not bad considering that we actually had to load 2 packages from the internet. Now let's see what happens with those 2 packages loaded, and I simply look at my startup time. So we're going to get out of Neovim and go right back in. And okay, we got the 30 packages loaded, which is what I expected. And we look at this, and we're at 34.34 milliseconds startup time. Not mad considering what I'm doing. And if I press my space bar, I see Which-key. I typically don't use Which-key. Sometimes I turn it on and then I'll turn it off. But let's see what the performance of the system is just by disabling Which-key. So we get a benchmark again. So it was PP, and so we see it's 34.34 milliseconds. So when I said PP, it's my leader PP, which is a pack. I use P for packages, and then P was the profile. And so that's how it's just muscle memory for me. So most of the keys, that commands you see at the top, H, I, U, S, X, C. For me, it would be leader PH, leader PI, leader PS, that sort of thing is the way I would go about mapping that key if I was going to do it directly from the keyboard without typing lazy and then a command. So if we get out of this and we go back and go back into custom, we look at customize, and this time we're going to get rid of Which-key. We're going to change that to false, and we're going to get out, and we're just going to go right back in. And 29. So notice Which-key's taken about 5 milliseconds. 5 milliseconds, and I realize it's not a great deal. It's not a lot of time, right? But what this shows you is when you're looking to tweak your packages and what's getting loaded and where your startup time is, you can play at the individual package manager, packet, the individual plugin, and Lazy has a really cool way of allowing you to do this. So let me go through how I'm doing this so you can see what I'm doing to make my experience a little bit better. So we've already seen custom. So this is just a name, it's the name of the plugin, true or false, whether I want it loaded. That's it. That's all I'm doing with this. But if I look at my utilities, which is, let me start with a init. Let's do that first, because maybe it'll make some more sense if I do that. Let's go for a init. So this is my init Lua file. You can see that I do bootstrap, clipboard, customize, functions, options, plugins, auto commands, and key bindings. That's just the order that I chose to organize things so I get a predictable startup, and I want to make sure, no kidding around, at the very end of my startup, I want my auto commands and I want my key bindings to take precedence over anything. That's why I load them last. But if I look up plugins, we're going to find that there's a core plugin file that Lazy uses, and it's very straightforward. You import your particular plugin directory. Lazy does not require you to do a bunch of require statements. You're telling it to import that directory, and it imports them alphabetically, okay? And you can see down on, let me turn off line numbering while you are. So on line 22 and line 23, you see that I have not disabled match it. I have not disabled match print. I wanted to do some experience, so I left that in that way for my particular test purposes that I were doing. But these other built-in plugins, I just get rid of them. So if we go back to the utilities file, Get on the right keystrokes. And we see the plugins that I'm loading. So I'm going to close that for a second. So if you saw my video on folding, you recognize the fold pattern that I use. So let me show you something that I've also done with my auto commands. You're going to see this in just a second. When I exit this file, and I'm going to get completely out of Neovim to demonstrate this. If I go right back into Neovim, I go right back to that file, which is utilities, everything is completely folded, okay? And I'm right where I left off. So let me do that again because I actually moved the cursor. So let me do it again. Go right back in, and we go to utilities. Go back to that one. We're right at the top. So my auto commands are making sure I return to the file where I left off. So let's take a look at Telescope for a second. We'll go down 12, and we're going to open up Telescope. And let's go down to 13, and let's put our cursor right there. I'm going to exit, get out, and come back. And I'm going to go right back to that line, and what we're going to notice is that the fold will be open, and that's because that's the way folds work. So it's really pretty cool, I think. So if I get out of here and I just get out of the editor, and then I go right back in and I do utilities, boom, I'm right back where I left off, okay? So how's that happening? If we look at auto commands, there's an auto command in here where we're going to reload the files when necessary. So if we take a look at this one, focus scan for its check time, so that's there if it's needed. If we go through these pretty quick, so here I'm just playing around with some of my colors, nothing fancy there. I turn on file types, so these are the patterns that are associated with which buffers can actually be closed by just pressing the Q key. This particular group allows me to do something very special with CSV files, and specifically I don't want the files being wrapped. I want my text width to be at 0. Formatting options, this is just me setting how format options the way I want to set. This is the one that brings it right back to where we are. So it takes me right back to where I was when I opened a file. So because of the way folds work, so if I close up the entire fold, if I use the navigation key, an L, as an example, it's going to cause the fold to open. So if I go to the next fold, they're closed again. So that's pretty cool where I can get the benefit of both, where I can have, if I go to the top of the file and I exit, when I come back in, the folds are completely collapsed. But if I had something open, it takes me right back to where I was. And the reason that's happening is if you look at the options, I've got the fold level on line 11 set to 0, and my fold method is set to marker. That's the way I'm navigating right back to where I wanted to be with the fold either opened or closed. Okay. So if we go back to the utilities and we take a look at Telescope, Telescope's a really good example of this. So Telescope right now, I've got it loading, and it's loading rather quickly at startup. I'm not playing around with events on it. It is lazy loaded, but I'm not doing any specific kind of event for Telescope. But you're going to notice I also have the Telescope command set up. So if I start playing around with my configuration, I will get Telescope loaded if I just run any Telescope command. So that's kind of my fallback position in case I don't have it loaded. But what you notice here is I can disable Telescope by using this enable function. This is a really, really powerful feature of Lazy. Now obviously I could have written this line of code, right? I could have just gone in and said enabled equals false if I wanted to. I could have done it that way. So I could have just said enable, sorry about that, E-N-A-B-L-E-D equals false, F-A-L-S-E, comma, and then done that. I could have done that and I got the same thing. I just wanted to control my plugins externally from this file, so I'm going through the process of where a plugin makes sense to enable, disable it. I'm going to go back and do that. It also allows me to check if one plugin is conflicting with another plugin, and where you see some of that happening is with colors and color schemes, and sometimes with key bindings. So it allows me to play with those things in a way that I can control what's coming on. I can get my I can get my configuration the way I want, then I can disable it. I can disable things around it so I can troubleshoot what's going on with my system. And it works pretty well for me. So if you see that a lot of these tree setter, if I want to disable tree setter for a particular test, I can just disable tree setter just by setting tree setter defaults. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you like the content, please give me some comments. Again, my name is Trap. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Have a good night. I'm out of here.